All right, so today's lesson, like I said, is Pro Tools routing, inserts, sends, all that good stuff. And we're going to start off by talking about aux tracks. Now, an aux track, if you can remember, I'm going to go in here to my Pro Tools session. And I've already got a bunch of stuff in here. I'm just going to go ahead and hide all this stuff for now. This. And we're going to talk a little bit about aux tracks. So the way we make an aux track is you can hit Command-Shift-N to get that shortcut going, and when you do that, it's going to pull up this window right here that has, mono versus stereo, our track type here, aux track input. We can see this one's saying it's in ticks because remember I changed my preferences to say all my tracks are just going to come up in ticks. So you can just leave this as the default. It doesn't really matter if it's samples or ticks for an aux track. And we can give it a name here if we wanted to, or whatever. I'm just going to keep it called aux for now. When we make an aux track, we can see the aux track has the same thing as everything else. Now, one thing about what I'm looking at here, you may notice I've got inserts A through E, inserts F through J, sends A through E, and sends F through J. It's because this session, when it was set up like that. So if I want to change that, so we're not looking at quite so much stuff, I can just go down here and change this. I can click on this little icon down here to change what I'm looking at in my mix window view. I'm just going to turn off the F through J on both the inserts and the sends here. I don't really need to see that. I also don't need to see my delay compensation. Don't need to see the comments. Everything else is good. So I can just click away here. And now once we go back, you can see now I'm just looking at a few things. You're probably pretty standard setup here. So if you're looking at too much stuff on your screen and it's like kind of going off the edge of your screen, you can just go ahead and hide a lot of that stuff so you're not looking at all that stuff. So this is an aux channel here, and as you can see, it looks just like an audio channel except for there are no record or input monitor buttons. The record and input monitor buttons are not here anymore. And that's because with an aux track, remember, we cannot record onto an aux track. We can't record any audio onto an aux track. It's just for passing audio through. If we look at it in the edit window here, with the edit window, again, it looks like an audio track, but instead of looking at, instead of having any space for any kind of audio editing, it just has our volume automation lane on it. So the aux channels, all they're going to show you really is your automation lanes. That's all they show. And with this one here, again, I do want to see, in this view, I do want to see my inserts and my sends a little bit here. That's just, I like to look at those things. And so there we go, I just turn those on there like that. And if you have any questions about that stuff, please talk to me later. So I have a little bit of a sniffle today. All right. So that's what our aux channel looks like here. And let me just pull up like an audio channel here so we can just see the difference in these. Mostly they look the same. You can just see that instead of having a record button or an input monitor button, they do not have that. And here, if I want to look at, for example, on my audio track, it has waveform, blocks, playlists, analysis, warp, all that stuff, whereas my my aux track just has the volume, mute, pan, left and right, which is just our automation stuff here. So that's the big differences between these, like just the way they look, cosmetic differences. The real difference is it goes a little bit deeper, and what do we use an aux track for? And this is kind of our big question today. What do we use these for? And today, as I said, our title for things is routing, inserts, and sends. Now, you might say, well, okay, we're talking about routing and inserts and sends. Why are we talking about aux channels? Well, because aux tracks are how you route things around. It's how we get things moving around and what we can use them for. So the aux tracks are good for three things. They're good for send effects, they're good for subgroup mixing, and they're good for external audio input. And we're going to talk about two of those in a really big way today. We're going to talk about send effects and external audio input today. We're not going to really get too much into subgroup mixing today. I'm going to touch on it, but we're going to get into that in depth in a later date next week. But the basics of subgroup mixing we will kind of cover it a little bit. I just want to show it to you, but then I want to kind of dive deeper into it and really explain it and why we do it in another lesson, because we just don't have time to get into it today. But today we are going to get in depth in send effects and external audio input. So before we do that, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a quick rough mix of this track. So we've got these things here, my vocals, and I'm going to go ahead in this track here and make a master fader. Command Shift in. I'm going to hold down my command key and hit the right arrow once to turn it into stereo, and I'm going to hit down a couple times to get a master fader, and I'm going to hit go, and now it's my master fader. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here into my track, and with this one here, in my edit window here, we can see I might want to do a little bit of quick editing here on this, like just to get rid of some of the space. I could do this. Remember yesterday we talked about or not yesterday, but a couple days ago or something, we talked about our strip silence. So I'm going to go ahead and use the strip silence on this stuff here, and I'm just going to pull this down. So like this, yeah, that's pretty good like that. Make sure we got a little start pad, a little end pad, and I'm going to hit strip, and I'm going to do the same thing with this one here. This is pretty good. I'm going to hit strip on this, boom. And just to make sure we've got everything here, turn this back up. Maybe a little bit. Turn that down. I'm going to adjust my strip minimum duration so we don't have any kind of, there we go. That's pretty good. Hit strip on that one. Yeah, make sure we got this one as well. I'm just going to strip out some of these silent bits here in the beginning and the end of stuff just to clean things up a little bit. This one here has some stuff. Yeah. And this is, not a bad thing to do with your track, just to make sure that you've got, make sure you're not cutting off the ends. Oftentimes, if I see I've got a lot of things that are ending at the same time, this is like a drum kit, right? So I've got a lot of things that are ending at the same time over here. I can actually just edit it kind of by hand like this and get rid of the end over here and this bass line here. Sometimes it's a little bit easier just to do things by hand, and that just kind of depends on what your audio data is in here. So now I've got like a rough little edit here. Let's make sure about this one. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and get this out of here by hand as well. There we go. So now I've just kind of cleaned that up. Real broad strokes here. Nothing really, I'm not like zooming way into things. And, if anything is kind of cut off, I'll be able to fix that a little bit later. Right now we're just kind of doing broad strokes. But this is something that I would expect you to do, is to go through and just kind of do a general cleanup pass here. So we've got this, and I'm going to go ahead and just click somewhere in the middle here to get a rough mix going. All right, so just make sure y'all can hear that. Okay, so you can see, first of all, everything is just straight across at 0 here. And if I want to do a rough mix, really we don't want to start everything off at 0. It's not bad to have everything kind of panned right into the middle. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to pull a lot of these down here so we can kind of pull things up as we go. So I'm going to go ahead, instead of just muting them, I'm going to pull them down like this. I'm going to get my room left and right here, my overhead left and right. And remember, we talked the other day in your one of your assignments that you had. We talked about grouping tracks together. So I'm just going to take this overhead left and right, and actually I'm going to keep them. I'll keep them in the middle here for now. But I am going to group these together. I'm going to call this the overhead group, and I'm going to go to ID and change this ID to O for overhead. I think that's good. Yep, mix and edit windows, cool. And the same thing with our room, drums. And these are drum microphones, in case you were wondering. I'm going to hit Command G to group these together. Call this my room. And again, I'm going to change this ID number to R here. There we go. So now I've got those like that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull these down so we're not hearing these. And let's just listen to our kick, snare, and tom. All right. Sounds pretty good there. keep everything panned in the middle for now. The reason why I'm going to keep everything panned in the middle now is so I can just do a rough mix without having panning affecting my mix. So I don't want to be listening to how it's panned to get the mix going. I want to listen to just the rough basic levels of things. So these are okay here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up my overheads, pull that down like that. Okay, and I'm just pulling it up real quick just to hear what it is. That sounds pretty good. Let's listen to that bass. Okay, cool. I'm going to go ahead and turn the drums down a little bit so I can make sure I can get my other instruments in here nice. Listen to the guitar here. Now what you'll notice I'm doing when I'm doing, and again, these are just broad strokes here, but what I'm doing is I'm just kind of getting things roughly set up, and I'm pulling instruments up into it. I establish my drums and my bass first, and I'm pulling instruments up into it just until I can hear them, and so it sounds kind of good with the mix. Now, I tend to like my drums a bit on the loud side. You might want your drums lower in the mix. This is just kind of how I like to have things set up. Let's go over here and get to where that guitar 4 is happening. Cool, that sounds pretty good. I'm going to go back to where my vocals are over here. All right, cool. So there we go. We've got a rough mix that we can work with here. And now that we've got this kind of going on, I'm going to go ahead and pan these left and right. And when I talk about a rough mix, I mean a rough mix, just something really, really rough. Don't spend a lot of time on it. Don't start thinking that it has to be perfect, because it doesn't. It's just a rough mix. So let's listen to this now with the stuff, with the drums panned left and right. Cool. And you can hear a big difference there in the sound if you're wearing headphones. And I actually have to make a couple of adjustments there, because now with it panned left and right, it's a little bit on the loud side, especially this room is for me. All right, cool. All right, now one more thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab the choruses, and I'm going to put those on their own separate tracks here, just to separate things out. So I'm going to make this track called Vox Verse, and I'm going to go ahead and listen to a different part here. Just another night, till I saw you there. You were so complex, I had to study every layer. All right, so that's the chorus right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this track. I'm going to right-click on it and select Duplicate, and I'm just going to duplicate everything. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the the chorus and the verses on this separate track. So I go over here. This is going to be called Vox Chorus. And I'm just going to go through and I'm going to get rid of the vocal sections. Let's see. I think this here is where that should be. Zoom in. Boom, 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 boom. Let's just make sure. Yeah, there we go. Cool. All right, and these are all choruses here at the end as well. So I can see I've got the choruses now on this track here, and I've got all my vocals on this track here. And the reason why I did that was because I may or may not want to use slightly different effects on him and you know, different levels and stuff like that. So I'm not just constantly writing automation. And this is something a lot of people do with Pro Tools, is that, you know, we don't need to really concern ourselves with how they, you know, it used to be done when we had, like, you know, multi-track, like tape machines and stuff. When in those days you really had to be concerned about how many tracks you had. You had to do a lot of automation, writing, and stuff like that. But with Pro Tools, you know, you've got a whole bunch of tracks, and this song really doesn't have that much going on with it anyway. It's just got the drums, bass, and some guitars and a vocal. So we can actually split this up into other things. Nico says, how much artistic liberty can we take with these mixes? The answer is a lot, but I still want it to sound pretty good, and I'd like for you to have a reasoning behind what you're doing with stuff. So I don't want you just to do something and to do it when you turn it in. I'd like you to have, like, I did this because of this, or because, you know, other songs in this kind of genre sound like this, or I thought it would be cool to do this or that or whatever. It's not that I care what you do, because it's your artistic choice, but I do want you to have some kind of thought process behind it. I want it to be thoughtful. Whatever you do to it, I want it to be thoughtful, and not just like if I say, why did you do this? I don't want you to just be like, I don't know. Like, then I'm not going to be terribly happy about that, because I don't know is not a great reason for doing something. So we have this in here, and so we got this basic mix here. Now, the first thing we talk about here in the notes, now we're going to go back to the notes, and we're going to talk about this routing and aux tracks. So the first thing we're going to talk about here is send effects. Now, in here, the example I'm using is these tracks here. This looks kind of like drum tracks or something. Let's go ahead and use a send effect for our vocal. Now, there's two types of effects that we have going on. We have insert effects and send effects. And I'm just going to go ahead and skip over here to the end so we can just look at this, what these differences are. Insert effects affect the entire signal flowing through them. And we talked about this the other day a little bit when we were going over our test, the quiz. The insert effects are things that affect the entire signal. So things like distortion, EQ, compression, fuzz, stuff like that. These tend to change the entire sound of things. Whereas a send effect over here, and you can see there's a nice little list of things here in the notes, a send effect would be like a reverb or a delay. Now, with a reverb or a delay, you're really sending the signal to that reverb or delay. Now, a lot of you might be saying, well, Tony, I've seen people put a reverb or a delay directly onto a track, like right on that track right there. And yes, I know you can do that, but we often don't do that. And there's a couple of reasons why we don't want to do that. So let's just go down here and get the vocals. I'm going to go ahead and get this chorus vocal here, and we're going to solo this out.
Who are you?
All right, so if I put a reverb directly on the track, here's one reason why we do not want to put reverbs directly on tracks. So I've got my reverb here. I'm going to go ahead and get a mono to stereo reverb going here. I'm just going to use the deverb that comes with Pro Tools. And if I put this reverb directly on the track, here's what it's going to sound like. Let's put a plate reverb, which is a pretty standard reverb for vocals. And we're going to use a medium one. And let's just take a listen to this. Okay, you hear that? That sounds like it's just completely got like complete reverb on it. There's nothing but reverb, and it sounds like the person's. It doesn't sound realistic, like the person's actually in the room with you. In order to change that, I would have to take this dry wet here and bring it down so it's not 100% wet. Remember, wet is the entire affected signal, and dry is the dry signal. So here, let me just go ahead and put this up, and I'm going to zoom in here so you can see, and let's go ahead and put this in.
Who are you? Who are you, my love?
Right, so there's that there. Here, let me actually go ahead and, well, I was gonna loop it, but we don't need to loop it.
Who are you? Who are you, my love?
So hear how that sounds there. I'm taking it from dry to wet. So here's dry.
Who are you?
Also, it doesn't sound natural. We never really hear people where it sounds like that because there's always some kind of reverb going on.
Who are you? Who are you, my love?
Right, and here's this here. Got this going in. It's about 50%. Again, this is still too much reverb to me.
Who are you? Who are you, my love?
And now it sounds like somebody's like in a room somewhere. We can't really see them. We're just hearing nothing but the sound of their voice bouncing around that room. This is really good stuff to understand when you're talking about sound design. If you're doing sound for picture, movies, TV, stuff like that, this is really great stuff to understand about that. But for music, we don't usually hear nothing but reverb. We usually are going to hear some of the dry sound as well from the instruments, and that goes for any instrument, whether it's a vocal or not. So that's reason number one. We don't really want to put the reverb directly onto a track because we're always going to be adjusting this dry wet here. So that's one reason. Admittedly, that's not such a big deal because whatever, oh Tony, it doesn't really matter. I have to go ahead and adjust the dry wet. I have to do that anyway for a lot of other effects. You're absolutely right. That's not that big of a deal. The other reason why we don't usually want to put a reverb directly onto a track is because of why we use reverbs. The whole point of a reverb is to kind of recreate a space. Everywhere you go, you're constantly hearing the sound of the space on your voice or on whatever sounds you're hearing. Even if you're outside. Outside is just a big open space, but maybe outside, maybe you're in a canyon, so you might hear like an echo of a sound. Or maybe you're in a forest and you might hear some reflections off the trees or something like that. If you're in a room, like the room I'm in here, it's just four walls. It's just a square room. So these walls here are pretty reflective. There's nothing really on the walls. If I'm in a parking garage is all metal cars and cement floors and walls and ceilings. It's going to be very, very reflective. Different materials reflect stuff in different ways. Now, this is can be a little bit confusing. Now, everything we're talking about right now should be a little bit of a review from Mod 1, but it's a little bit easier to think about if we think about how we see things. Audio and visual things, audio and visual, actually react very similarly, not to the same materials, but they react in similar ways to different materials. So, for example, if you think about different colors that we see, these different colors, the reason why we see different colors is because they're reflecting light back to us, to our eyes, at different wavelengths, and that's why we see different colors. If I have something like I have this here, this we can't see through it. You can kind of see through it. If I stretch it, you can see through it a little bit more, but I can't see through it. But if I hold up my glasses here, I can see through this. It's a different material. And then if I hold up my phone or whatever, I don't know, I don't have a mirror here, but if you have a mirror, the mirror reflects the light back to us. So that's what we're kind of seeing here, is that these things here, they reflect light in different ways. Mirrors reflect the light back so we can see, like we see a reflection. Other things capture the light and they just reflect back like a color. And this is obviously super, super basic overview, and I'm not like a light person, but sound works in very similar ways. Different materials reflect sound differently. Some of them actually just hold the sound in and do not reflect it at all. Some of them reflect sound a little bit. Some of them they kind of hold on to it, but they reflect a little bit. Some of them let sound pass through. Some materials don't let sound pass through. Some of them reflect sound a whole lot. So for example, cement, like if you have a smooth cement surface that's very smooth, like what you have in a parking garage or a cathedral, it's going to reflect the sound a lot. That's why if you go into a parking garage or a cathedral and you clap your hands, it's not just a bap, it's a psh. type of sound. And that's what is going on. That's what our reverb unit is doing. It's recreating the kind of environment that we are in. So if you think about this, right now I have two versions of my vocals. I split the vocal into a verse and a chorus. I've got the verse here, and here's my verse. Let's listen to the verse.
Just another night.
Right, and I've got my chorus over here. Now, for both of those, I probably want that person to be standing in the same room for both of those. I don't necessarily need for him to be moving into a different space for the verse and the chorus. He sings the verse, he's in a room. He sings the chorus, he's in a room. Well, if I have my chorus, if I have my reverb directly on the track as an insert plugin, if I want this person to be in the same room for my verse and my chorus, I would actually have to have the exact same reverb on both my verse and my chorus. So I have this, so now I've got the reverb for my verse and I've got the reverb for my chorus. And so if I play my verse, let's go ahead and set this up here, set that one up there. I'd have them set exactly the same way.
Just another night until I saw you there.
So you can hear that little reverb on there and this one here as well.
Who are you?
Right? But if I decide later on as I'm mixing, I'm like, you know what? I actually want to hear it be like a bigger reverb space. So I have to go over here and I have to change the reverb amount for both of them. And I go here to set this, and let's set that one to 3.4 as well. Boom.
Who are you?
You can hear that reverb a little bit more. Let me turn this up a little bit. Let me put it to 50%. And any change I make to one, I have to make it to both of them.
Who are you?
That is...
Just another night till I saw.
Now, this is only 2 tracks. But if I wanted to put my drum kit into a reverb, like into a room, I would now have to take my reverb over here to my drum kit and put it on every single track. And if I wanted to make a change, well, now I have to go in here and I have to say, okay, now I'm going to make a change to this, like this here. I'd have to make that change to every single one of these reverbs. And that's another reason why we don't want to put a reverb directly onto a track, is because then I'd have to end up changing my reverb all the time. Now, this is something that is technically possible in a DAW on a computer. If I have enough computer processing power, I could put a reverb on everything. Yes, this one made everything stereo because of the reverb plugin I used. And Nico, you bring up a pretty interesting point. Actually, reverbs should almost always be stereo, and that's a thing. That's like a pretty important thing. They should almost always be stereo. But so I don't want to have to put a different plugin on every single track, and if I make a change, have to go ahead and make that change to every single track. It's just not something that I want to have to do. So, and I can't do it if I'm in like a hardware world. In a hardware world, how many reverbs do you think you actually have in hardware in a studio? My studio that I had back in the 90s and early 2000s, I only had one external reverb. I had some reverbs in the synthesizers and stuff like that, but I only had one reverb that I could use for my vocals and stuff until I got Pro Tools. But in the 90s, I didn't have Pro Tools. I didn't get Pro Tools until 1999. So I had one physical reverb, so I had to learn how to send everything to that one physical reverb. So in order to do this in Pro Tools, I'm going to go ahead and hit Command-Shift-N to make a new track. Oh wait, I've already got an aux track here. Hold on, let me just grab this aux track. So this aux track that I made already, aux 2 here. So I've got this aux track. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and give it a name, reverb, like this. I'm going to abbreviate this name, RVB. And so this reverb here is now, it's a stereo aux track. It's called reverb. There's no reverb on it yet. So I'm going to go up here to my insert. I'm going to go ahead and put the reverb on it. Use that deverb. See, it's all stereo here. You always want your reverbs to be stereo. Now, what I can do is I'm going to go ahead and set this up how I want it to be set up, like this. Keep it 100% wet. Do not let it be dry at all. The deverb always, for the default, for some reason, is always at -4. I don't know why they did that. I'm just going to put it up to 0 here on the gain. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do two things, and this is in our notes. We're going to go back and just look at the notes here in a second. But I'm going to set the input for this to be bus 1 and 2. And I'm going to set the sends on these two tracks here, my two vocal tracks, verse and chorus. Set the sends to go to bus 1 and 2 here. There we go. So I got my sends set to bus 1 and 2. And I'm just going to go ahead and just turn this up all the way on both of these. So now we can hear the reverb.
Just another night until I saw you there. You were so complex I took.
Wow, that one got cut off at the beginning of that word.
She was so
Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and skip over here.
Who are you?
Now we can hear that both of these vocal tracks are going to this reverb right here. They're both going into this reverb right here. Now, you might be saying, okay, Tony, that's a lot of reverb on that vocal. How can I get less reverb on the vocal? Well, what I can do is I can just turn down the send amount of how much I'm sending to that reverb. I'm going to hold down Shift so I can see both of them at the same. So I can see both of them at the same time here. This one's my verse and this is my chorus. I can see that up here at the top. It says verse, it says chorus. That's the track I'm in. So now
Who are you?
I can say, all right, my verse.
Just another night.
Maybe I don't want the verse to have so much reverb on it.
Just another night until I saw you there. She was so complex I had to study every layer. Who are you?
Now maybe
Who are you, my love?
maybe I want a little bit more reverb on the chorus than I have on the verse, but I want it to be the same reverb sound. I just want a little bit more. So I can just push up my send amount here. Now let's just go back. Let's take a second to kind of stop and go back and look at the notes here just to make sure we're understanding everything that I'm talking about, because this is kind of some pretty complicated. It's not complicated, but it's some stuff that we need to make sure that we're understanding correctly. Okay. So first of all, we've got our insert. We don't have any insert effects on here right now. We've got our send effect here, which is our reverb here. And what we're doing is each track has two outputs. We've got our main output, our output of the track, which is the entire signal, and that is this right here. So if I go look at this, if we look in here, see where it says main out? This main out, this is the output of the track that goes to my master output. This is the whole entire everything that's on the track. So if I put, let's go ahead and put a couple of plugins on here, so we have some insert effects going on just so we can see what we're talking about here. I'm going to go ahead and do this, and we're going to put this to 100 and set this to 6. There we go. And I'm going to just take that and copy it over to this one here, and let's put a compressor on here as well. We'll use the compressor limiter. Comes with Pro Tools. And I'm just going to use a preset here, vocal comp.
Just another night until I saw you there.
All right.
She was so complex I had to.
Okay, we're going to use that one there. This one here we might need to set a little bit differently because he's singing slightly differently. Also, what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in here so we can get that breath.
She was so complex I had to study every layer.
There we go.
Who are you? Who are you, my love?
All right, nice. So we have on here, we have the compression and EQ on both of these. Like a little bit here, not too much going on. And that signal here is going out of this into our master output over here. So that's this right here. Now, the other thing we've got though, this other output is our send output. So each track has two outputs, the main output and the send output. And a send output is basically a copy of the signal. It's a portion of the signal. It's not going to be, it's the same signal that's going from the output, but one volume level, the send level, is like copying it and sending it out its own little way. So for example, here's our main output here on the bottom, and here's the send amount right here. Okay. So if we go over here, we can see if I click on this one here, when I click on it, it pulls up another fader. So let me just go ahead and let's play from the verse here.
Just another night.
So we can see here,
Until I saw you there.
I have a fader down here in the bottom and I have a fader up here. This fader here, I can get to it by clicking on this bus 1 and 2 button right here, and it pulls up this fader. If you want to see it a slightly different way, then we can go over here and go to View, go to Mix Window Views, and we can go to, wait, not that, sorry, Expanded Sends, and we can say Send A, in this case here, boom, so I can actually see my level right up here. Somebody says, is putting a sub under a bass guitar a good idea to make the low end hit harder? And the answer is, yeah, sometimes. Depends on your bass guitar. But they actually make plugins specifically for that. So, and I mean, like, I guess what I'm interpreting your question to say is like a sub, like a plugin that creates more sub frequencies. If you're talking about like a sub speaker, like a sub, I guess so, but subs are usually kind of woofy sounding. You have to control your bass guitar a lot to make a sub sound good. Zach, you are here. What is up, Zach? All right. So, all right. So just continue on here. We've got our main output here, and then we've got our bus level output right here. That's this fader right here. We can see it's right there on there. Now, I don't really use these too much myself because they're a little bit on the small side for me. I like to click and open this up to see my main, like a bigger fader here. But this is your send amount. You can see they're connected together. And if I go down here, we're going to hear different things from them. So let's just check this out. If I turn my aux send all the way down,
Just another night.
it's going to be completely dry. This level here is what it's doing is it's sending signal to the reverb. This is what we call our aux send. Now you probably remember on the Mackie 1604, the aux send was a knob. It's the same thing here, except for this is not a knob, it's a fader. It doesn't matter what it is. What matters is the concept behind it. It's sending more signal over to the aux, whatever it is on your aux. In this case, our aux is this reverb here. So if I turn this up,
Just another night.
we're going to hear that reverb.
Until I saw you there.
Okay. What we're doing is we're sending the signal to the reverb here. This is controlling how much signal we're sending to that reverb right here. I'm going to go ahead and hide all these other tracks so we're not confused by looking at too many tracks. Let's go ahead and hide those other tracks and just put this over here. So if I go ahead and adjust this volume level here on the track, the main fader, that's not going to affect that reverb at all. So here, let's just turn the reverb level down.
Just another night.
If I turn it up or down,
until I saw you there.
We're just turning the level up and down. It's not affecting that reverb. If I turn this one up and down,
Just another night.
it's affecting the reverb.
Until I saw you there.
It's affecting how much reverb we are hearing because it's sending more signal to that reverb.
Just another night. Until I saw you there.
Okay. Now, if I want to turn this down in general, but I want to keep that reverb amount, but I just want the level of his voice to be lower, but I still want it to have that reverb on it, I can adjust this one here with the reverb and leave it alone here.
Just another night.
Still has reverb on it.
Until I saw you there.
Still has reverb.
She was so complex I too.
And it has the relative same amount of reverb on it because this fader here is actually controlling my overall level, and then this fader here, the bus send amount, is controlling the level that's being sent to the reverb. But as I turn this one up more, it's sending more signal to the reverb, and we're getting a little bit confusing again. So I just want to take a minute to pause and explain something about buses. All right. Why are we not? Come on. Come on. Come on. There we go. Okay. So that's this right here. So here, the way that Pro Tools works is you have a bus, and this is the same thing as normal audio systems. You've got the bus in there, and this routes the signal around. So everything we just talked about is right here. The send buses are set the same as the input on the reverb aux track. So this works the same as a bus in real life, and again, this may be it may be a review for you. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw you some pictures here on my iPad. I've got my iPad connected up to my computer, and we're just going to go ahead and draw some pictures. So let's say, for example, that I have I'm in New York City. Whoops. I'm in New York City, and New York City has some streets that go like this, down like this. Here's this one, and let's say this is 9th Ave. And then over here is 8th Ave. Like this, and then we've got 7th Ave over here as well. Okay, and then let's say that I'm in Midtown here, and maybe I'm near, like, I don't know, 42nd Street or something. 42nd Street goes through all these. This is 42nd. And here is where SAE is. Over here, maybe on 18th. And then down here is maybe, let's say it's like 14th or something like that. Obviously not drawn to scale. Okay, so let's say it's something like this. We've got this in here. Now, maybe the M32 bus goes up and down. Here's my bus. And this is like the M16. And here's the M8. And I've got different buses that can maybe go east to west as well. And if I have this bus here, let's say I'm standing here at 9th Ave and 42nd. And I've got a friend who calls me up and says, "Hey, I've got some cheesecake. I want you to come eat cheesecake with me." And I'm like, "Wow, I love cheesecake. My favorite thing in the world. I can't wait to go and eat some cheesecake." And I say, "Where are you?" And he says, "Oh, I'm down here at 14th Street. So here's where my cheesecake is. Yummy. Cheesecake. Cheesecake."
right? Cheesecake. Yay. So I want to go from here to here. I want to go from point A up here to point B down here. Or let's call this not point B. Let's call it point C. And so I say, don't worry, I'm gonna be right down there. So I can catch the M32 bus to go down here from here to here. Here all the way down boop, to here and have cheesecake. Yum, okay? But what I might do is I might say, hey, I might call up some of my friends and say, hey, guys, where are you? And they might say, hey, we just finished up at SAE. We're on the street. We're on 18th Street and 9th Ave. And so, oh, cool. Okay, well, why don't we all meet up and have cheesecake? I'm on the bus right now. I'm on the M32. It's going to be at 18th Street in about 5 to 10 minutes. And why don't you jump on the bus with me? So they all jump on the bus, all my friends here. AJ, Crispy, Moises, all these people. Whoops. Let's make all my friends are purple. All these people here. The whole class is invited. Okay? And you all come here and you jump on the bus with me. Right here. And we all go down to C. And this is point B. All right? So all of them can jump on the same bus with me, and we all go to this area. Now I want cheesecake. Yeah, now I want cheesecake too. Raphael, let's go get some cheesecake after this, right? So we all jump on this bus together, and we all get this cheesecake, and we're all happy. This is the same way that buses work in Pro Tools. This is how you route audio around in Pro Tools. Pro Tools here, we have over here, if I look at any kind of input or output, we have access to these things called buses. And it doesn't matter if it's on your main input, your main output, or your sends. It's not a send thing, it's a routing thing. So buses are for routing. Let me just write that down in these little image that I'm drawing here. Okay. Buses are for routing. Okay, that's what buses do. They route the audio signal. So anything that I've got connected up here is going to connect up to the same bus. So if I have bus 1, bus 2, bus 3, bus 4, bus 5. And then maybe I have another bus 1, bus 3, bus 5, like this. And over here, I've got these are my outputs. And these are my inputs. And over here, I've got bus 1, bus 2, bus 3, bus 4, bus 5. Let me spread these out a little bit more. Okay, like this. So if I've got this kind of setup here, so these, bus 1, anything that has a bus 1 on it is going to go to bus 1. Anything that says bus 2, go to bus 2, bus 3, same thing. Bus 4, bus 5. Like that. So you see how that works there. Everything's going to go from one to the other, from the out to the in. Bus 1 is going to go to bus 1. Anything that says bus 1. So these two here say bus 1 here. And then these here say bus 3 here. And this one here says bus 5 here, like that. And they're going to go to their same ones. Okay, that's how this stuff works. So in Pro Tools, if I want my something to go to something else, I'm just going to set up the bus here to go to that same thing. So I set up my reverb here. My reverb input, I want to bring signal into that input. So I set it up to be bus 1 and 2. And I've got my sends here, which are going to split the signal off. Those are going to go to bus 1 and 2. Let's say I've got my drums. Whoops. Let's go ahead and pull my drums up. All my drums here, like this. I got this other aux here. Let's put this aux right here next to the drums. I don't need my bass. There we go. This is a mono aux. Hold on a second. Let's get a stereo aux. So here's the stereo aux. I'm going to call this one drum reverb. And I'm going to say, all right, I want my drums to go to another reverb, but I want this reverb to be slightly different from my vocal reverb. Instead of having a plate reverb like I have here, I want them to have a room reverb. So I'm just going to set this up. I'm going to make a drum reverb here, and I'm going to put a reverb on it. And I'm going to call this reverb room reverb here, medium, there we go. And I'm going to set up my reverb to have an input be bus 3 and 4, and it doesn't matter which bus it is, it just matters that it's a bus that's not being used by something else. And now all of these drums, I can send them all to bus 3 and 4. Boom. Now they're all going over here to bus 3 and 4. So if I want my drums, I'm going to mute, here, let's solo out my drums real quick. Boom. My overhead, oh, one of these got panned earlier. Maybe not. All right, so now, so these can all go over here. Right? And I can hear, okay, there's like a little bit too much, the reverb is a little bit too big. So I'm going to change it to a small reverb here. And now I've got a little bit too much reverb going on with these here. Maybe turn it down a little bit. There we go, that's a little bit better. Cool. And you can hear how if I turn this down here, it's sending less signal to my reverb, which effectively is giving me less reverb sound. So it's not really turning my reverb down, it's sending less signal. So let's send less signal to the reverb so we get less reverb sound in the mix. Okay. So all these here. Now if I wanted to have more, I wanted to hear more reverb from my snare drum, I can control my snare drum independently of everything else. So I can have a little bit more dry sound or a more wet sound from that reverb by turning it up or turning it down, the send signal, the send amount to that reverb. So now my drums have an independent reverb from my vocals here. So the vocals have the reverb they had before.
Just another night until I saw you there. She was so complex I had to study every.
And you can hear if you listen carefully that the reverb that I've got for my vocal is a longer reverb. It's a plate reverb, a bit longer, and the reverb I've got on my drums is a bit of a shorter. It's a room sound, and they have a very different type of sound to them. Now, one thing about reverb, since we're talking about reverbs right now, is that reverb is the type of thing where you will use it on every single song, but when you're first starting off, you're probably going to use too much reverb. It's just the way it goes. Reverb is hard to hear, and it's hard to really differentiate, especially in a mix of a lot of instruments. Most young engineers, young producers, use too much reverb in the beginning, and then later on, as you get older, as your ears develop and you start to hear things a little bit better and differently, you'll start to recognize how much is too much reverb, how much is too little reverb. The kind of key that people say about reverb, the kind of secret to reverb in the beginning especially, is you put it up until you hear it and then you back it off a little bit, because especially in the beginning, what you actually hear is probably not, it's not really correct because you're still getting used to hearing. You're having to train your ears how to hear things. So you want to put it up and then kind of back it off. In the beginning, it's going to sound like there's too little reverb, but that's probably actually the correct amount of reverb. Let's do this. Let's take a break here. I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording.